I think we're ready to start. Good afternoon, colleagues. Good morning or good evening, wherever we are. I know we're not on the same time zone, but hence I use all the greetings that we know of. My name is Zanele Mthembu. I'm a country coordinator for South Africa under CTFK. I am a co-moderator for the session. My colleague Bintu Kamara is also part of us. I think she hasn't joined, or she may or may not be able to join because she has traveled. And so in the meantime, I'll be taking over the reins. Today we're deliberating. It is a pleasure to welcome you all in this session, very important session. This commission is deliberating on an important aspect for effective tobacco control. That is the importance of building sustainable partnerships. Almost every aspect of development can only succeed if founded on a strong, meaningful, and goal-directed partnerships that are very strong and multi-sectoral. The importance of establishing sustainable partnerships is also amplified in the United Nations 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, popularly known as the SDGs. In particular, goal number 17, it speaks to the need for building strong partnerships between countries and international organizations, including at country level. Our very own international treaty, the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, also highlights the need for strong partnerships and cooperation and collaboration at all levels and amongst all sectors, whether it's at country level, sub-regional, regional, continental, and beyond, effectively even at cross-border level, because tobacco and tobacco industry, it knows no borders. So as we gather in this session, what then are our objectives? Our objectives to share experiences in building sustainable development, and also to understand approaches involved and some of the tactics and strategies which have been employed, and therefore we can say best practice in establishing partnerships that are working at country level, at regional level, international level, even at a cross-border level, amongst all sectors of society, amongst governments, intergovernmental, and beyond. That said, colleagues, please allow me to introduce our esteemed panel of experts who have a wealth of experience in building partnerships. I'm going to start at a global level. This afternoon, we have Dr. Mary Assunta, who is a seasoned advocate and has a wealth of experience of more than 30 years in tobacco control. She's currently the head of research and advocacy at the Global Center for Good Governance in Tobacco Control, popularly known as the GGTC. Also a policy advisor at SIADCA, and she has spent a number of years reviewing tobacco industry documents, BAT, PMI, and JTI. She's a lead author, that's very important for us to note. She's a lead author of the Global Tobacco Industry Interference Index. And importantly, in 2003, she was honored with the Luther Terry Award for her outstanding leadership in tobacco control. That's Dr. Mary for us. And Dr. Mary is going to be sharing with us her experiences in developing partnerships and focusing particularly at the Southeast Asia Tobacco Control Alliance, their experiences there, and also the GGTC perspectives. In the main, Mary will hear more about the realities they encountered and the challenges and how they surmounted those challenges to become such an example of best practice in establishing partnerships. That is Dr. Mary for us. Mary, over to you.
Thank you very much, Zanele, for that very kind introduction. Fellow panelists and participants, a big and warm hello to you. On behalf of the Southeast Asia Tobacco Control Alliance, SIADCA, and GGTC, may I express my thanks for this opportunity. About 20 years ago, Bangon Ritipagdi, a tobacco control advocate from Thailand, Menchi Velasco, an advocate from the Philippines, and me from Malaysia, we came together and we formed SIADCA. At that time, 20 years ago, we were already involved in tobacco control in our respective countries for quite a while. And we knew that in order for us to move forward, in order for us to advance tobacco control policies in our respective countries, but also in the region, that we really needed to forge a regional organization, and hence SIADCA was born. But the important thing about this organization is that we needed to have strategic partnership. So who are the partners? You know that the region, that's the ASEAN region, is very diverse politically. You know, you've got Western style democracy, you have got socialist government, communist government. So in that kind of a diverse political setting, what kind of partners do you choose, you know, to advance tobacco control? One thing that the three of us knew is that we cannot have a cookie cutter approach, you know, and try to apply it to all of our countries. And in some of our countries, NGOs are dismissed. In other countries, NGOs are, you know, welcomed by the government. So we knew that if we wanted to engage with government, we needed to form partnerships with groups or institutions that the government will recognize. So we formed a core group, and in each country, we identified partners, you know, who can come together across the ASEAN region. So typically the makeup of the core group is NGO, a government representative, an academe, and WHO. Because we know that in some countries, it is easier for the government to recognize the academics, you know, even if they're dismissive of NGOs. In other settings, WHO is an important partner for tobacco control. So this four component then, you know, becomes the representatives of the core group. And pre-pandemic days, you know, in the early noughties, you know, we would have face-to-face meetings where we would come together and we would have strategic planning meetings. a buy-in from the government is also really very important. If you want to address a particular issue, we need to know where the government is at the moment on that issue. What is it exactly that they need? And in some settings where governments are more open, they are able to tell you exactly. So, this discussion, even if they don't speak much, but listening to the other governments in the region would actually enable them to open up and really express the challenges and difficulties that they are facing. And then we will have to identify what evidence is specifically needed for the government and who is the best institution or organization to provide that evidence and in what format, which means that who provides the evidence is as important as the evidence itself. So I want to talk about strategic partners and give you one example in Cambodia. After the FCTC came alive, we were all working to individually to get our countries to ratify the FCTC. And let me point to Cambodia, the predominantly Buddhist country, and you have a small NGO that is trying to rally support for the government to ratify the FCTC. And what they did was to turn to the clergy. So they had meetings with the monks, and in fact had a tobacco control program to help monks quit smoking, and then had meetings with the supreme monk. And that got a lot of publicity, and which actually helped Cambodia to ratify the FCTC. So the important thing here is to think outside the box when you want to identify strategic partners. And then we need to identify champion countries as our partners. In tobacco control in the ASEAN region, Thailand was a champion country. By 2005, they had already achieved several things, including bans on fact displays. So when the Thai government speaks on tobacco control, many other governments actually listen to it, and also the Singapore government, the Brunei government. So government to government assistance was also provided, and that assisted tobacco control to really move forward tremendously in the region. And then, of course, we've got the non-health intergovernmental departments. I think is a really intergovernmental organizations. I think is a really important consideration. We know that the tobacco industry speaks economic language. It talks business. So if we want to move tobacco, we really need to engage with the non-health sector. And here in the ASEAN region, SIADCA reached out to form a partnership or to form relationship with the ASEAN Secretariat, because that's the economic caucus, and the governments are meeting regularly, making economic decisions and also social cultural decisions. And so SIADCA became a technical advisor to provide assistance, technical assistance to the ASEAN through that avenue. So I think my time is up, and I'd like to conclude by saying what then would sustain SIADCA over the years. It is that we were consistent in the way that we engaged with our governments, and we were trustworthy. We proved that governments can trust us, with information, and we were reliable, which means that we were on call when the government needed something urgently. We were ready to provide that assistance, and also that it's a long-term relationship. We're in it for the long run. And finally, of course, the FCTC Article 5.3 is really very, very important, which means that when we form the partnerships, we need to ensure that we address this particular issue of industry interference. I'll be happy to answer questions later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mary, for that insightful sharing of your experiences at SIADCA. And indeed, one understands why it is that SIADCA is one of best practices in tobacco control partnerships. And indeed, I can't agree with you more. You talked about the importance of consistency, the importance of always being available for government and other sectors, the importance of being reliable with information. That is what kept the partnership strong and kept it going and yielding the required results. Thank you very much. And now we're going to move to the next one. As I indicated, colleagues, we're going to start at a global level, then we'll come to the regional level and go down up to the local level at country level. And now we're going to move to the next of our speakers. It would be Leonce Cesar. Leons is an executive secretary of the African Tobacco Control Alliance, popularly known as the ADCA. And the ADCA is a pan-African network of civil society organizations that are involved in tobacco control. And Leons oversees the operation of the organization and the execution of the program of the organization. And their primary mandate is to provide training to country partners at country level and regional level, but also provide technical assistance on advocacy for policy change, also on drafting of drafting of the policy, tobacco control policy, as well as tobacco industry monitoring. Leons is going to be talking to us about sharing his insights as well about this cross-border engagement and cross-border partnerships that ADCA has forged, and they have managed to successfully support throughout our own region. And so, Leons, I'll hand over to you at this point in time. You have 6 minutes to engage with us, and then after your presentation, we're going to have Q&A. And colleagues, please feel free to use the chat box. Feel free to use the Q&A box, and that is how we're going to be communicating. But others can use the app that has been availed to us. You can also use that as we engage and move forward. So over to you, Leons. Thank you very much. I think you are muted, Leons. We can't hear you. Hello, Leons?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, great. Okay, all righty. Thank you. Over to you. Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you speak English. Maybe you should try speaking French, then we can know if we hear you.
We
are not hearing the translation.
Okay.
Okay, I think maybe you should go ahead. Translation has been enabled by the hosts. I think you should go ahead. Thank you.
Ok. Donc, je disais, ce thème, la construction d'un partenariat durable pour la lutte anti-tabac en Afrique, est un thème aussi très important pour nous. Et nous avons
I'm not sure whether it's only me. I can't hear.
Yeah, I can't hear. Me too. I can't hear. I can't hear the translation.
We can't hear the translation either.
Yeah. Are we ready?
Okay, Leon, has everyone put it on English?
Yes, I'm on
Yes.
English.
Yes, I'm on English as well.
Should we, in the interest of time, should we, whilst Leons is trying to set out the technology to sort out, should we move forward? Are you okay with that, Leons? Or are you sorted now? Yeah, there's a problem. Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Leons, for that insightful presentation. And I think I can't agree with you more about the importance of engaging and ensuring that the youth voice is heard, and not only heard, but the youth should be a partner in tobacco control. And certainly, if I can share with the team as relates to ADCA, in South Africa, we have an experience in that last year during the ban on the sale of tobacco products when COVID started. We experienced the support of ADCA, and it went a long way because government was like, really? A regional support for local civil society? And it really went a long way. And that is the importance of this cross-border and regional partnership. Thank you so much, Leons, and thanks to Mary. So colleagues, at this point in time, we're gonna be taking questions just for a few minutes before we move on to our next speakers. And I think, Mary, if you could also share with us the challenges before we take questions. What challenges did you encounter when you started? Because I think a lot of people, a lot of colleagues would want to know, okay, what challenges did you encounter and how did you surmount those challenges?
One of the main challenges was that the evidence that we had was, from the West. It was very good data, very good evidence, but we couldn't just transpose it into local situation. We needed to generate our own evidence. And it wasn't, and the kind of evidence we needed wasn't just on health effects of smoking, but we actually needed evidence that would speak to the hearts, of officials, which meant that poverty is an important issue. So we need to show how smoking, and tobacco use actually is connected with poverty, and which meant that we needed to find the right organization then to do this kind of research, right? And if you want to reach out to developmental organizations, what is priority, I think, is a challenge because, women's organizations would have a different set of priorities. So actually to fit tobacco control and make it top priority, to persuade our partners to, especially new partners, to then come out with the evidence posed to be a challenge. But the way we overcame it was we simplified everything. We know that nobody likes to read long reports, 100-page reports, very, very scientific academic type of language. So we actually made it easy and digestible, and we found that went much further. So to generate local evidence, generate evidence that applies to the region was a really important point for us in the early years.
Thank you, Mary. And whilst waiting for questions, Leons, I'm going to pose a question to you as well. So as ADCA and driving the partnership in the region, what has been the important lessons for you as ADCA? What has been just the one? If you can cite one important lesson, what has it been? Great. One voice for Africa, so that we are heard by everybody, even at the African Union level. That would be very important. Now, any questions? I can't see the Q&A chat box. Okay, I'm seeing a question. Perhaps, yeah, maybe Mary, because then both of you actually, any one of you can take this one. It is an inevitable challenge that in building partnerships, one may unintentionally fall into the silent trap of connections with the tobacco industry. How can such be avoided most effectively? Falling into the trap of the tobacco industry. How can that be avoided as you move forward in forging partnerships?
First of all, I want to say that the tobacco industry remains the #1 challenge, that we face on a day-to-day basis. When we forge partnerships, we always do homework on our partners, especially new partnership that we want to get into, and it's really important that we have the common understanding that we don't work with the tobacco industry. So, we have to have that discussion very honestly at the beginning already. So that way, you can come together, and when you have you have a common goal, and we know, and the partner knows that tobacco industry and tobacco control don't match, that they are irreconcilable. So therefore, I think with that understanding, we will be able to move forward. So I think that a lot of discussion is really needed, and also doing it, just talking isn't enough. We really need to get down there and start doing the tobacco control, start, having meetings, and start actually putting to use all the knowledge and the evidence and the skills that we have.
Great, thanks, Mary. Thank you, Leons. I guess that also talks to the importance of vetting your partners, ensuring that you have thoroughly screened them, so you don't fall into the trap of partnering with those that are already in the pockets of the tobacco industry, which is very common in tobacco control. Thank you to Mary and Leons. Now, colleagues, we move on to the next speaker, Dr. Ernest Zotwa. Dr. Ernest is a coordinating director for public health and universal health coverage in the Ministry of Health in Cote d'Ivoire. He coordinates the national program for the fight against smoking, alcoholism.
So let me just quickly check. Okay, should I English and French interpreters? Okay. Thank you.
Can I proceed now?
Quickly, just give us a second. The interpreter has joined.
We're waiting for the interpreter.
Ouais,
That was correct.
je n'entends pas l'interprétation. Je n'entends pas l'interprétation.
Okay, I'm not getting the interpretation.
I see the interpreter. I'm getting a message from one of the organizers saying the interpreter has joined. Do we have the interpreter?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, please continue.
Okay, thank you. So I was saying,
Can you
I was
hear me?
introducing Dr. Zotwa that he coordinates the national program for the fight against smoking,
Donc,
alcoholism, drug addiction, and
on
other
était en
drugs.
train de parler donc
And he's
des
going to be
programmes
sharing
que
with us
nous
the
avons
challenges from a government
engagés
perspective
ici.
of forming these partnerships and ensuring that they're sustainable. But also, Dr. Zotwa is going to allude to the issues surrounding what works from a government perspective in forming these partnerships, what doesn't work, and what corrective measures from their point of view that have been implemented and that have been successful in ensuring that the relationships, the partnerships that have been forged are sustainable and they yield the desired outcomes. Over to you, Dr. Zotwa.
Merci. Bonjour, j'ai pris en cours l'interprétation. Alors, si je comprends bien, c'est que... Est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Yes, clearly. Thank you.
D'accord, ok. Bon, de façon, pour aller très rapidement, il faut dire que les partenariats dans le cadre de la lutte anti-tabac, c'est un élément important qui est privilégié, surtout le partenariat avec la société civile, c'est vraiment un élément assez important. Et effectivement, dans notre pays, dans le cadre de la mise en œuvre de la CCLA, de la constant cadre de l'OMS pour la lutte anti-tabac, le partenariat avec la société civile, qu'elle soit nationale ou internationale, nous a été un apport important. Aussi avec la société civile, mais aussi avec d'autres organisations telles que l'OMS, aussi, qui nous a aussi soutenus. Et puis, bon, les organisations internationales reconnues qui nous ont vraiment soutenus. Je ne veux pas citer ici d'exemples de sociétés civiles internationales, hein, voilà, pour ne pas en oublier. Voilà. Mais c'est vraiment important. Et leur importance se situe à quel niveau? Ça se situe, comme tout le monde le sait, ça se situe parce qu'il y a certaines appréhensions qui ne sont pas maîtrisées par les organismes étatiques, par les structures étatiques que nous sommes, et que la société civile peut réveiller la conscience des décideurs, peut faire un plaidoyer, peut essayer de voir dans quelle mesure voilà, on pourrait avancer voilà. Je sais pas si vous me voyez maintenant. Oh là là. Voilà, d'accord. OK, merci. En fait, je suis à deux fronts actuellement, sur les deux fronts actuellement. Bon, bref. Donc, et comme je le dis, comme j'étais en train de le dire, et ce partenariat doit être durable, doit être entretenu, les entités non gouvernementales doivent travailler de concert avec les entités gouvernementales pour assurer une pérennité de l'activité. Nous avons par exemple commencé à élaborer le premier test de notre projet de loi anti-tabac dans les années 2012, et cela avec certains premiers partenaires internationaux, l'OMS, puis l'Union, etc. Et on a été joint par la société civile aussi ivoirienne qui faisait aussi quelques plaidoyers auprès de nos autorités, pendant que nous aussi, nous étions en train d'élaborer les tests. Et aussi, il faut dire que les entités gouvernementales ont besoin aussi de renforcement de capacité pour pouvoir mieux adresser la question. Parce que souvent, on pense que les entités gouvernementales ne veulent pas prendre les décisions. Non, mais c'est parce qu'ils n'ont pas souvent la vraie information. Ils n'ont pas souvent l'information réelle. Et dès lors, quand ils ont l'information réelle, factuelle, ça facilite la prise de décision. Mais c'est pour cela que ce panel a dû, c'est un deuxième point que je vais arriver, il faudrait que la société civile travaille toujours de concert avec les entités gouvernementales. C'est-à-dire que cela doit être fait en fonction des priorités, en fonction des besoins. Il y a eu d'autres exemples de sociétés civiles internationales. Je prends le cas, par exemple, de CTFK, je prends le cas de ACBF, je prends le cas en Côte d'Ivoire, il y a Clucode, il y a un consortium des ONG, il y a par exemple l'Union, et ça, quand on a eu à travailler de concert, on arrive toujours à retenir des entités. Mais au-delà de ça, de la société civile, et là, permettez-moi que je vais peut-être terminer là, au-delà de cette... pour que cela soit aussi, il faudrait aussi que d'autres partenaires, je ne dirais pas partenaires, que certains organismes puissent aussi souvent se déplacer et venir dans des États pour essayer de faire des plaidoyers. Je prends le cas, par exemple, dans le domaine de VIH, par exemple. Je prends par exemple le cas de l'ONU-SIDA, où il y a des visites du responsable du international exécutif qui faisait souvent des visites de plaidoyer en direction Et ça, par exemple, c'est des choses qu'on peut initier dans le cadre de la lutte anti-tabac, que la haute hiérarchie, que ce que j'appelle entre guillemets les gardiens du temple, les gardiens de la lutte anti-tabac, que sont les organismes internationaux, multilatéraux, au plus haut niveau, souvent, il y a des contacts bilatéraux envers des pays, non seulement pour faire des plaidoyers, mais pour renforcer les capacités à ce plus haut niveau. Mais toujours, c'est dans cette même dynamique de travailler de concert. Entités non gouvernementales, entités gouvernementales doivent regarder dans la même vision. Je voudrais m'arrêter là pour l'instant. Je voudrais vraiment dire un grand merci à cette première organisation de notre grande lutte anti-tabac. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zotwa, for sharing with us from a government perspective. And we know it's not always easy for government, and all your efforts are appreciated, because we know government has competing priorities. And of course, you've got timelines, you've got deadlines on everything. And at the end of the day, you have to prioritize, pick up a priority within a basket of priorities, and everything ends up being a priority. And we thank you for sharing those insights. And of course, you emphasize the issue of capacity building, and that is very important for any partnership to thrive, but also the importance of ensuring that we engage international organizations at all levels, and the importance of engaging government, all government institutions and agencies within tobacco control. And I like what you're saying, because indeed tobacco control is one of those programs that are cutting across. So adopting a developmental approach so that it makes sense to everybody in government and as also a way of ensuring that they participate, because within that, they can identify what speaks to them. Thank you very much for sharing that, Dr. Zotwa. We'll take questions after the next speaker, colleagues. In the interest of time, we really got to move forward. And our next speaker is going to be Michael Adegbe. Michael is a fund manager for Management Sciences for Health, popularly known as MSH, and is based in Nigeria, Abuja. He's an expert in contract and grant awarding and has extensive experience in the field. He's currently the fund manager for Tobacco Control Policy Action Fund for Africa, which is sponsored by the Gates Foundation and managed by MSH. So basically, he manages funding that is directed to African governments to support them in their endeavor to implement their priorities within the tobacco control program. Michael is going to be sharing us the pros and cons of working with government, but also how has he managed to navigate that very difficult environment in working with government. The challenge is because, as Dr. Zotwana indicated, there's so many priorities in government, and you coming now as a funder, you've got your own, you've got priorities that are aligned with government priorities. However, you've got timelines. Now, how do you navigate that difficult pathway between the government processes, the red tape in government, and the need to make progress and navigate the route to deal with everything else that happens in government? Over to you, Michael. And of course, how do you find the middle ground? How have you managed to find the middle ground within that space? Thank you. Over to you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Zenele. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone on the call, wherever you are on the time zone. My name is Michael Adegbe, like Zenele introduced me. So I'll just jump straight to our work in Africa. The Tobacco Policy Action Fund for Africa, as TOPAFA for short, is supported by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. When this project started, when the conceptualization of the project started, we were faced with two key questions. What strategic partnerships do we need to be able to be successful in supporting African governments? What are the challenges that African government currently face, as we look forward to addressing them so that we're able to come up with strategies that are effective? And of course, it's two-way exchange, understanding how the government work and our systems or our support that we're bringing into the place, so that both of us can have an exchange and negotiate what works per country context. So we did a survey of who are the key players in tobacco control in Africa over the years. For the past 10 years, we saw the work WHO has done. We saw the work CTFK has done. We saw the work ACBF have done. Another Siatka as well. We read wide to understand whom are the tobacco control actors in Africa that we can begin to engage with. So if you remember, I think this was in 2019, we were part of a meeting in Lusaka, trying to engage with tobacco control actors to understand where we can come in, what place can MSH, or what role can MSH play in this party, as I will call it, to contribute or complement to the efforts of other actors. So we thought we need to limit the policy areas that we're going to support. Of course, working with African governments that have signed on to the WHO FCTC, that was very, very important for us to be sure that there are governments that have actually passed legislation on tobacco control and developed policies, as the case may be. So we wanted to engage with government that have made have reached this milestone, made progress towards implementing tobacco control, and also looking at what are the technicalities that we may not be aware of. As Zenele introduced, you could see I am not a tobacco control expert. I'm also an expert in working, supporting government directly with funding support, and of course in contracts and grants. So we needed to engage with who are the actors here in tobacco control, and that helps us form what the strategies are as far as approaching and working with government. Our model basically is supporting government directly with funding support to implement their national tobacco control priorities. So we have chosen 5 policy areas, at least for now, we can scale up as the years goes by, but we want to focus on the 5 policy areas, namely is the policy on graphic health warning on tobacco products packaging, the ban on tobacco products promotion, advertising, and sponsorship, the policy on public ban on smoking on public spaces, and then also the policy on progressive tax reform to reduce affordability of tobacco products, and also measures that will be put in place to ensure that a structure, a funding for a national tobacco control program within the country. So we leverage on support that, like I mentioned, ACBF, WHO, CTFK have laid. We have seen is the effort they've made. For example, in countries where they have set up a National Tobacco Control Committee, we see that that is as a result of efforts from these tobacco control actors. So if you are supporting policies that's addressing measures to set up a tobacco control fund, we are working on that platform already set by tobacco contractors already in the field. So that was our strategy, to see that these are strategic partners that we need to engage with to ensure the effectiveness of our support to government. Now, looking at government themselves, that is the second part of this. So after establishing what our protocol is as far as the policy areas that we're going to be supporting, we have set out to support up to 10 countries over the next 4 years, of course, 5 years beginning since 2020. So 10 countries are our mark. Currently, we have supporting 4 countries across Africa in the first round of the grant. Another round which happened in 2021, about 2 months ago, we selected another 4 countries that will be supporting for another 1 year, and of course, doing follow-on awards based on performance. Now, these countries have each been applied to get support in specific policy areas, of course, limited to the 5 policy areas I've mentioned. And we have a technical evaluation committee, which made up of members from tobacco control actors and experts that I've mentioned, whom give us technical advisory as to what to support, what is feasible and has the potential for near-term success within 1 year. We got those technical advisories from them, and that informed some of the funding we have seen happen with countries currently in Africa, and even the 4 countries we have selected in the second round. So this engagement with government helps us get some good information. I also want to refer back to what Mary said, making reference to that very good practice, and we adopted the same of understanding the dynamic of how the government structure is, how they operate, how we are able to navigate. So we did that by, first of all, doing what we call a pre-award survey to understand each government system, how they operate, what are the hierarchies and approval authorities within the government, what are the modus operandi, that is applicable to each country context. And that gave us good information to understand how that government works, and able to design the grant funding in such a way where it's more effective and to avoid delays. Remember, the key here is understanding that the government system and structures are dynamic. They are not same as what we see in the civil society because of how the structures play out. So understanding that is very, very key for us. And it helped us navigate to understand, if we fund the government, what are the challenges? Key challenge I want to share is, for some countries, you find that there is a single treasury accounting system, which all the funds go to one source and then is managed from there across all ministries of government or parastatals. So we found that may take some time, considering the approvals and the processes that need to go into play before funding are released for implementation. So that gave us also good information to structure what the funding mechanism looks like, what are the risks, and what are the mitigation plans we want to put in place. We saw a good number of African countries whom have the autonomy to operate donor-funded bank accounts within the ministry or divisions within the ministry to help implementation. And we found that there's been more effective use of funds, utilization of the funding support itself. The turnaround time for getting things done was a little bit shorter because the control was within the ministry or department within the ministry, as opposed to having in a country where there's single treasury account, that the flow has to come from above down below, and it may take a whole lot of time. Keep in mind, our funding is for every year, and then we'll follow up with another year. We continue to scale up like that as we see the progress of implementation. It is done deliberately for control purposes, so that any changes, as we know we are working with governments, we make room for changes. We may want to get hold of particular government stakeholder who you need for a meeting to implement an activity, for example, in October. but priorities may come at play and that may be changed. So we try to allow for that change to happen, and that's why we do it on a yearly basis, so that changes that we don't foresee coming can be made along the way, and we can make those effective in the next year as to come. I want to commend also the effort of government across Africa. I would say before coming to this space, I didn't know efforts or progress was made again in regards to tobacco control in Africa, but from what research we have seen, I want to commend the efforts of government signing up to WHO, FCTC, implementing those policies, the legislations, all those efforts that come into play, but not to forget also the efforts of WHO, CTFK, SIATCA, ACBF, and other tobacco control actors and civil societies. That is the platform which MSH is able to work with now to actually support this government directly. Without what these actors have done in the past, I don't know that MSH should be here today, making efforts, actually navigating the environment to see how we can support the African government. One key learning from us here that we have seen, also that we have, is very, very key, like Dr. Zotwa mentioned, is that tobacco control in Africa, as far as how governments implement and do it, requires some level of capacity from the government side, administrative apparatus or working tools, to be effective in getting job done. We have seen that these capacities needs to be improved or built on. We have seen that there is need for more effective monitoring, hence the need for a better capacity or improved capacity of those personnel or units within the ministry that have the responsibility for monitoring. So our MSH is here. We are open to provide capacity building as is required, engagement of any specialized consultant or provide specific support. That is open. We are here. That is what we are, because without that piece, even providing direct funding support, we may not get anywhere without people that have capacity to actually get the tobacco control work done. Thank you very much for the time I'll be able to speak to you. I hope I'm able to present what we have done and you learn something from it. I'm also looking forward to learning what we are also doing to implement on our side to make our work better. And I'm open to questions, of course, from any member of the panel or anybody participating on this call. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael, for talking us through your experiences and exactly what you do in working with government. And I think you've mentioned quite a handful of pertinent points in working with government as a funder, a program funder, which is quite important. The one thing, again, you've reiterated on the point raised by Dr. Zotwa, also who is in government, the importance of capacity building. Not only capacity building of on tobacco control, but you have gone further and added the importance of capacity building to monitor the financial expenditure, how funds are spent vis-a-vis the program planning. Also, you've spoken about the importance of landscape analysis before you even move in and understand and get in and work with governments, the importance of doing a landscape analysis so that you create your own context and understand what how each government works, because we may be in the same continent, Africa, but each government is different. And everything, the modus operandi is completely different. And unless that is done, it won't be easy for anyone coming from outside to work with government. Thank you for once again highlighting that point, because it's very, very important. And so, colleagues, let me open the floor once again for questions. Any questions to Michael and Dr. Zotwa? Dr. Zotwa from government and Michael from an international funder that is supporting the implementation of tobacco control priorities. Any questions? Andre, do we have questions somewhere in our chat or in the app? The only question I can see, I think it would relate to our next speaker, and so I'll raise that with her. But for the two speakers, anyone with a question or point of clarity? It doesn't seem like, and so Michael, I have a question for you. Are there any challenges that you have encountered, particularly as it relates to the issue of government priorities as opposed to what we've agreed upon with them, looking at that within the framework of limited capacity in government. As we all know, it's always the case in government, there's always limited capacity. Here you come, a funder, you've given government the money and they need to produce results. Have you encountered any challenges within that framework, and how did you manage to unlock that?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. Yes, we have encountered challenges like that. I would say each government, like you have said, are different, the way their approach is. And we have also seen the influence, or will I say popularity, of the tobacco control focal person goes a long way, and the level of work done with support from civil society in that country also goes a long way, you know, to put that government in a place where they are taking the tobacco control work seriously, as they see the importance. What we have also noticed is that we work directly with the government, yes, but our direct engagement is with the tobacco control unit of the ministry. So you find that there's a level of hierarchy above that person, which may be the permanent secretary in the ministry or the minister, or in the cases of some countries we have seen, even the office of the president is involved in this, because this involves direct funding support to the government. So the office of the presidency is kind of involved. They even involve the office of the minister of finance, since this is direct financial support we're giving to the government. So you see the layers that we have to work with, particularly looking at what the funding will look like, what the disbursement structure is, you know, clearance from the Minister of Finance, office of the president, before it comes to the office of the Ministry of Health. So you see that triangulation there takes time. So knowing that these are challenges to be faced with, navigating the environment requires strategies that take into account what that government structure is. If you had planned for it to be 1 year, you need to know that you need more time, looking at the nature of the government you are faced with. So also it ties into the structure of our funding. Like I mentioned, it is maybe a fixed amount award, which is performance-based, but we have made it so that there is room for changes and, you know, improvements throughout the grant process. Key challenges we have seen as far as priorities are, there are a lot of changes that may go on in a country, such as, you know, political, which may be a new government coming into play, the minister, the government wants a new set of minister, or PAMSEC, you know, as the case may be, the political office holders who have direct, you know, effect or have a link to our project, that becomes an issue, because you then have to wait for the new person to come in, settle in before work starts going on. So you ask, if we had begun the program before this change, how do we accommodate, you know, this new change, these new ideas from a new government coming in when we've already established something on the ground going? What we try to do is make it very simple. We try to, like I said earlier, limit our funding areas to 5 policy areas, which there is documentation that this has passed through legislation. This has gone to the, you know, level at which funding is the only barrier that is holding it back from implementation. And of course, that is where we come in. So, and then if these changes come into play, we already have a grant agreement set. If there are concerns from a new government coming in that are valid, of course, like I said, we have tobacco control partners that we work with. We run this by them, try to get what their opinion are as far as, in accommodating this change we want to work with. And then we make that change in the agreement and we keep things moving. So we haven't seen a government that has come in, like we have seen some transitions happening, even in Ethiopia and some other government that we have seen, but that hasn't stopped work from going, because of how we have remained flexible to understand that these are dynamics that you can't really control, and you have to make room for adjustments as you keep that partnership going. Also keep in mind, there may be changes even in capacities that the government needs to work with. We are implementing tobacco control in the country, in some cases national level, in some cases we have highlighted, you know, focus locations that this will happen. So there are dynamics even within the country that come into play, even as we have begun work, that after 2, 3, or 4 months down the line, we begin to see this wasn't taking account of, this is how this operates here. in Ethiopia, they'll tell you they use Aramaic to report on certain activities. In other areas is the English. So you have to deal with that sort of dynamic or changes. I'm just mentioning that just as a reference of some changes you might see that may not be seen initially as you begin to work. So be open to remain flexible, to work with the government, because these dynamics change. Like I mentioned, they may be political in nature. There may be some certain policies or laws passed within the country that changes the context of the country and that affects how you work. So keeping this in mind will help you open up your horizon and not just have a straitjacket way of doing things. Also, we keep ourselves open to learnings even from our partners from all parts around the world, and it informs why I'm even keen to partake in this conference, seeing what Mary is doing, and you know what every other people are doing all across the world will help us, you know, improve strategies and also help the government see reasons why some changes need to happen to inform, you know, effective tobacco control implementation in Africa. I hope I was able to address the question, and I'm open to, you know, explaining more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. You've really given us a mouthful, and importantly, the issue of flexibility and understanding the political dynamics. That's very important in tobacco control. Okay, colleagues, we're fast running out of time. Let's move on to our next speaker now. Remember, we started at global, we went regional, we went to government, we went to an international organization and non-governmental organization, and now we're coming local. And so our last but not least speaker, very important, is Rubina Kitungi. She's an executive director for Uganda National Health Consumer Organization. Rubina is an experienced leadership and management expert with more than 15 years experience in civil society leadership in the health sector. She's a community advocate at heart, having been the voice of communities, having been
help me.
There's some distraction. Can I continue? So Rubina is also the principal investigator for numerous studies on the rights-based
come and
social accountability. And therefore, oh dear. And therefore, in essence, she's an advocate for people-centered policies and participatory approaches. She's going to be sharing with us approaches they've employed in ensuring that the tobacco control advocacy processes are successful, but also looking at what other approaches have they employed whilst they engage the new partners, moving from the former partners to the new partners. What have been the challenges? What can we learn from that? Is it working? Is it not working? What strategies did you employ? Over to you, Rubina. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zanele. For Uganda, we were able to pass one of the strongest laws in the region, and implementation is moving. Of course, there have been challenges, but partnership, especially for advocacy, it can be very complicated. One of the things we do, of course, is to immediately map who these partners are going to be. But also in advocacy, there is the face of the partnership, there is also the back. Sometimes what you see is not what is real. So we had to, and of course, the other main factor for advocacy and partnership was that we were very aware that the tobacco industry is strategically tapping within the same partnership and the same, looking at our advocacy strategies and seeing how to counter. And of course, we had the tobacco industry vigorously, even taking us and government to court. We struggled to get into court. And of course, you don't know behind the scenes who is working. But our partnerships, of course, included local and international partners in advocacy. And I have to say that we tapped on data. One of the things you have to do very effectively for advocacy is to be able to provide reliable data that partners and stakeholders can see and appreciate, but also that the tobacco industry is not going to refute or say that what you are saying is not the truth. Locally, we tapped into Parliament as a very critical partner. But of course, when you talk about Parliament, you are also talking about the politics within Parliament. One of the challenges, some of the challenges with the politicians was that the tobacco industry was also looking at those politicians, and some of the ones who agreed to go along with us were targeted by the tobacco industry and they campaigned in their constituencies. And we've had a number of elections. So the politics and the elections is a big challenge for advocacy against the tobacco industry. Of course, the other partners included for information was the School of Public Health, who provide the data, and CTCA, though, so who built our capacity and the capacity to be able to have the regulations and to maneuver the politicians as we build the capacity of the media and the other partners. Another partner that is largely may not be seen is the public, because the public, individuals and collectively move the view of parliamentarians, they move the view of government. Government will listen to them and they will fear what the local community is going to do if they are not following a protection for public health. So we worked very closely with the community. We had champions within the community. We had community advocates. We had voices of people, especially one of the partners was the Cancer Institute. So we had stories and pictures of people who had suffered under the tobacco influence, and they were able to stand up and speak for us. We were also targeting women as a major category for us, because women in our law, we had protection for children. Our law is very specific that we put the age below 21. If you are 21, you are not allowed to use tobacco, you are not allowed to sell, you are not allowed to interface with the tobacco industry. So we brought women on board as a special category of partnership for advocacy to speak for children. And we were privileged that our Minister for Health, Honorable Acheng, is a woman, and she was very strong. She stood up, she spoke with confidence, and her message was able to move the country and to move some, especially of the implementers and law enforcers. And that was a category also we were targeting, because you need the enforcement arm to be able to listen and agree with you. It is, but working with government is tricky. It's a balancing act. The priorities for them change. In implementation, for instance, we have seen that during COVID-19, government is not looking at enforcing tobacco control. They are focused on COVID-19 and enforcement of the SOPs, and you find that there's a setback on what we've targeted for tobacco control. But you have to have a balancing act working with government as they focus on other priorities sometimes and are not able to see where you would like to go or not moving with you in the same direction. Another critical partner for us, also tricky, was the media. We were able to work very closely with the media. And of course, the first thing is capacity building for the media. So they need to know and appreciate what your argument is. Why are you against tobacco? And they have a principle that says you listen to the advocates, but you also listen to the industry. So it was a competition that we had to beat. And we worked with the partners to be able, one of them, like we worked very closely with ATCA and CTCA to have the evidence and information and put it out there so that the media would pick very quickly and use that kind of information to be able to counter the lies and manipulations of the tobacco industry. I cannot forget the role of CTFK, especially in strategy. as we went to court with the tobacco industry, we did not have the capacity, we needed a friend. And that for us is what CTFK became. They were the friends we ran to when we were in court, and court was saying we need to pay damages to the tobacco industry. We were able to have a backup position, a strong position for us to run to and say, this is where we can go when things don't seem to work out. Of course, the politicians, what we have found out, for instance, is that some of the politicians we thought we were working with and were convinced on our side are some of those that have been mentioned in the list of those who were paid by the tobacco industry. So all this time you're working with them, you think they are on your side, but some of them are working behind the scenes with the tobacco industry. So in advocacy and partnership, you have to be able to read behind the lines, but also to have the kind of investigation that will show you that what you have in the room is a spy for the tobacco industry and not necessarily a partner. So that capacity, that intuition, that level of understanding behind the scenes was one of the challenges that sometimes we think about and say we could have done better. I think those are some of the things we look back and say we could have started with understanding the politicians behind the scenes and differentiating between the face and the voice behind, to be able to know that maybe this is not a partner that you need to move with. The other thing for civil society, I think, in partnership and advocacy is to be able to plan for sustainability. Civil society works on donor funding, and you have to be able to say, when we are not there, how does this law go forward? How does enforcement continue? And how does the population defend themselves without us in the room? And for us, that was a major preoccupation, that we need to have the institutions of government taking over this knowledge and information, and other social institutions such as the religious-based institutions like community leadership and the opinion leaders, so that this can go on where we are not, because it's not good to assume that you will always be there. So that for us was a preoccupation, and we wanted a sustainable campaign, but also a sustainable fight against the tobacco industry. And the young people have been part of that sustainability also, that we have young people who are champions, who are committed to helping others, who are committed to never touching tobacco and to a tobacco-free environment for the future. So that was also an important consideration where we wanted to build capacity and leave resources as young people and communities. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Rubina. That was a mouthful. It's important for us to hear also from someone who works with communities on the ground. And that is what we have amply displayed right now, the importance of the voices of people on the ground, the importance of storytelling, because these are the people who bring stories which policymakers listen to and everyone else listen to, because they are talking from the first-hand experience, having been directly or indirectly affected. Thank you so much for that. And also the importance of understanding the politics that has come across, that is a cross-cutting a point which has come across from all our speakers, the importance of understanding the political environment and the dynamics in each setting that you are in, particularly in government, as well as other partners that you are involved with. And with that said, let me open the floor. We're running so much late, but I hope our organizers will afford us a bit of time, maybe 5-10 minutes. Andre, Maria, how much time are you affording us? 10 minutes? 5? Okay, let's just proceed, it's fine. Any questions? I've seen a question Okay, before I come to Catherine's question, let me read a question which I think is directed to you, Robina. It was asked earlier. How can we build synergies between rural and urban tobacco and its products consumers? Well, product consumers, right? As the percentage is now higher in rural than urban. Now, I suppose this the person is Chikoi Chapala, is from Zambia. I think it's from Zambia because he's citing the prevalence in Zambia with the rural area being 11% and in urban areas being 8.2, essentially meaning in rural areas, the consumption, the prevalence is higher than the urban settings, which is really quite a challenge. So how can we deal with this? What form of multi-sectoral approaches can be employed to save Africa from tobacco epidemic? Now that we are seeing even in the, oh, I see Maria say we've got 5 minutes. Now that we are seeing even in the rural areas, now the case of Zambia, the prevalence is getting higher. How do we deal with the partnerships? How do we ensure that the partnerships that we form, even in rural areas, they are sustained and they're impactful and goal-directed so that we reduce the prevalence? Robina, over to you.
Thank you very much. I think one of the things that we have to focus on is ownership of this campaign. Sometimes we drop in and out as advocates, as civil society. We need to create a level of ownership at the community level, that they understand what the tobacco industry does. They also know what the dangers of tobacco can be. And the biggest and best target would be young people. Young people are not polluted and they are able to listen, and they can, the target should be a free world from tobacco. And it is only the young people who can take this forward. If you find, and if you talk about that Zambia problem, you find that the biggest consumers in the community is young people in the villages. These are idle people. Some of them are in school now with COVID, all of them are home. I think our best target for sustainability and the best message is young people. But I think the way we translate from the campaign here, and it's not just language, English and local language, it's also about the culture of who the village people are, who the rural people are as a culture, as a people. Sometimes we go and take what we have, and yet there are things they treasure and respect, and their understanding and interpretation and appreciation of what the tobacco industry should not do is different from us. I think the messenger is critical. Who is taking this message? It should not be us, and it should not be enforcement. We need to teach them to appreciate this information and to use it for their own. What is in it for me? I think that's what they are looking for.
Thank you, Rubina. And there's a comment from Fatou. Is actually saying, thank you for highlighting the importance of the voices of communities, and commending the other things that you raised in regard to domestic resource mobilization for sustainability at domestic level once international funding has dried up or has stopped. Very important. And there's a question from Catherine. Catherine, I saw your question on the chat. Okay, given the lack of local evidence to inform policy in the continent, do we have funds especially dedicated to tobacco control research? And of course, Catherine Egbe is our own researcher here in South Africa. So do we have funding for tobacco control research in the continent? Anyone of the panelists?
Yeah, I think we have looked at that, but we have a challenge that we need to address, because a lot of funding for research is given to academic institutions. I think we need a rethinking. that when we do research, we do action research, we do real research, we talk to real people, we go back, it is simple and can be understood and interpreted. Whereas it's good to have academic research. I think there's need for translation for those of us working in tobacco to pick quick information and be able to immediately use it rather than information that is packaged and put on the shelf. And I want to appreciate Fatou, because AFCA is one of the, we have also benefited in rethinking the strategy that we should look for funding for tobacco control, and the tobacco industry should be a target for us to receive funding to be able to tax and convince the country that the tax we get from the tobacco industry can be able to address non-communicable diseases, can contribute to universal health coverage. I think that is an area that we have not touched, and there's a lot of potential.
Thank you so much, Rubina. And Catherine, so Rubina here says we need action research, and we need to translate research in a manner that is consumable by everybody across board for them to be able to participate in tobacco control for sustainability. But also, as we forge those partnerships, people can only join the partnership if the research also speaks to them and addresses what is key to them. Any comment to you? Okay, Catherine says 100%, she agrees, Rubina. Thank you. Okay, we are nearing the end of this session. And so we won't have time to give, Rubina, you've really said quite a lot. Maybe let me give our other panel members, Mary, Leons, Dr. Zotwa, and Michael, just 1 second parting shot from your side, 1 second. Any important issue you want to amplify, just 1 second, a parting shot from your side, Mary?
Africa is in a really good place now, and you can move forward. And so I would say strategic non-health partnerships and more exposés on the tobacco industry.
Right. Thank you, Mary. Leon?
Yeah, I will say we need to stress on media and research, and this research has to be translated for tobacco for advocacy. This is building network partnership with the media is also key. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Leon. Michael?
For me, I would say it's still the issue of capacity. As much as we try to support governments, we should keep in mind capacities that needs to be built. This could be formal or informal or however you manage it. But then sharing our experiences also help us on how we engage and make room for this capacity building opportunities within government. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Rubina, just one second. Oh, I think she's not here, but in any case, she did give us really quite a mouthful. And so, colleagues, in closing, what would be the key takeaways here? And I think for me, and which is very, very important, understanding the landscape within which you're operating. If you are to establish partnerships, no partnership can succeed without you who is in the lead, or you, the group, as Mary indicated, with her group, they started by understanding and doing some groundwork to understand the politics, to understand who is involved, who are the key persons, who can be an advocate, who can be a champion, who is likely to oppose us even, and how do we deal with them. And the other point, consistency, reliability, accessibility, openness, and we need to have listening skills, not selective listening. We need to listen and be able to read in between the lines. There are messages that are not always communicated. You pick them in between the lines, and very often that is the actual message people are communicating. Also, in dealing with government, building partnerships from a government perspective, the importance of maneuvering the government red tape and understanding and being flexible. Michael amply articulated this point, being flexible as we form partnership with government, because government has a million priorities. But here we come, we bring another priority. Now, the question is, how do we ensure that government, not only the Ministry of Health, all of government, how do we ensure that they listen to us? Now, somebody talked, one of our panelists, and I think it was Mary, who articulated the importance of amplifying the intersectionality of tobacco control. Poverty, you bring poverty on board because tobacco control is a developmental issue. You bring HIV/AIDS, you bring matters around TB and so on. That's the intersectionality we need to bring for government to listen to us and to understand that tobacco control is indeed a developmental issue that will help the development agenda of the country. And of course, lastly but not least, the ability to understand that sustainability is at all levels. We need to rethink our agenda, the research agenda. Let's bring in the voices of the voiceless. Let the voiceless speak for themselves. Let the vulnerable groups participate, women, children, and so on and so forth. And lastly, but not least, Leonce, I'll use your quote as a closing parting shot. If you want to run fast, run alone. But if you want to run far, let's run together as a collective, as a region, as a community in tobacco control, as advocates and as activists in tobacco control, nationally, regionally, and internationally. Thank you, colleagues. This session is adjourned. Thank you. Thank you, merci.
Thank you. Thank you, Zanele.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Zanele.
Thanks,
Panelists,
Mary.
thank you, participants. Thank you so much, everyone.
Everybody. Thank you, panelists. Thanks, colleagues. Maria, are you there?